Hi, this is Paul Roberts of Conscious Counseling 101, and today we're going to continue on with the number and the philosophy of the grandparents and seeing or believing that we have their presence near us and the afterlife, because some people believe this, and I go ahead and talk with anybody that believes anything so long as they want to. If there's any way that I can shape what I'm talking about to help anybody out there, or to connect people, or to help the person that I'm talking about, even whether we've actually accomplished anything or not, but they've at least got another person to talk with. That's what I like to try to do in Conscious Counseling 101. And I like to help a person become as consciously aware of the different possibilities that they can, including not falling into traps. Very important to not fall into traps of delusion. So when I tell somebody something, I right away know that it's not a delusion because I know that I don't know it. Very important to be not trapped by one's own delusion. Very first important step to always take, to know that what we're saying and we're talking about is not known. It's consciously awareness of it. We can't know the other side. We can't know all the ramifications of it. So when we share in Conscious Counseling 101, all we do is become increasingly analytic of whatever it is that we looked at together and become aware of all the nuances and facets of it and maybe how it plays out in life. And through what comes back to us from how it plays out in life, then we can take genuine physical realm circumstances and say, yes, this really is affecting things. Like I talked to you in the video the other day about how, regardless of whether or not anything exists like God or Jesus or the Bible or anything like that, if people believe that it does and they act out accordingly as if it does, that produces real realm circumstances in our world. And if we become aware of that, we can trace it back to where it's coming from. And even if we can't ever prove that where it's said to be coming from is real, we can prove that man thinks it is, and it got at least to that point. Then we go into a leap of faith and say, did it go further than that? That's up to each of us as individuals to determine how that's going to be for us. So let me start off with, first I have two things. I have another number story to tell you that validates yours. And then I have a grandparent's story from a dream just last night. So that'll be very appropriate, and I'm glad that I had it because I'm glad I'm talking to you today, and it'll go somewhere with it. Okay, so the first number story was we're riding. A family's riding our bikes in Venice, and I see a license plate that says Surf It 9, and I say, "Oh, look, Anna, that's the coolest plate," because she points it out. I think that it says Surf It 9. I go, "Oh, look at that! It's the coolest plate." Somebody took the time to put Surf It because there's so many Surf It's down there. Surfing USA was written about all the different parts on the California coast in this Southern California area where people surf. And when I was younger, I used to think, because they're talking about Manhattan and stuff, and I had never gotten over here. I didn't know my geography of the United States well enough. I thought they meant Manhattan. I thought they meant Surfing USA all over no, they meant here. Anyway, this guy had this surfer plate, and it said Surf It or Surfer 9. And I go, look at that. Not only did he claim the word surfer or surf it, but he put the number 9 there. And I said, Anna, look at that. That's so creative. He took the only number that looks like a wave going over and curling over, like the surfer shoots the curl. And I'm going to go ask him, does he realize what he's done? I just got to know. So he was pulling over and parking, and I went over and I went up to him, and he rolled the window down, and I talked to him. I said, we saw your great license plate, your clever license plate. And I go, let me just tell you what I think of it. But before I do, can you tell me what the number 9 means? And he goes, well, I will, but tell me first what you think. And I said, well, I think that you've chosen well. The symbology of the shape and appropriateness of the number 9 of the wave that curls over goes perfectly with what your license plate says. And he goes, oh, shoot, I never saw that. 9's just my favorite number. So I said, well, guess what? There's a reason why it's probably your favorite number. Because subconsciously, that's what the number 9 looks like. And you're all about surfing. And he goes, wow, I never saw that. I'm going to never forget that. I'm always going to think of it like that. And he's been transformed in that way that the fact that I stopped made him see something that someone else saw in an analytical artist type point of view that he hadn't himself even seen. So this is the kind of Conscious Counseling 101 things I like to share. Like you had the 316. Okay, I didn't know you from Adam, so I said, oh, well, you don't know. Maybe you don't know. It's this. But you did know because you had the tattooed on your chest. Why is that number so significant? I believe the number is significant because you had connections with a loving grandfather that had been lost, and that connection was so strong in a part of your, not grieving process, but in a part of your loss but not wanting to be lost. You made connections. Now, let me tell you about the connections, and I don't want to deflate your bubble. I mean, Flatliners is coming out again, and you know, back when I was in high school, I think, or maybe it was college, Flatliners came out, and people just want to know, what is that feeling of going to the light? What happens? Some people say, well, your brain is deprived of oxygen, and whatever's left of it is still feeling different things and seeing, and then it remembers, and you come out of it, and you can report what you saw. I'd like to direct your attention to a Bible verse, and I forget which one it is. I didn't research it ahead of time. I know the Bible in my heart, but the numbers, I'm not a very good number person, detail-oriented number person. To me, numbers, I like to see the symbology of them, but not their ironclad things that they can lock down. But one of the things was somebody was in hell, I guess, and they were talking, and they were saying to God, send Lazarus, send this person, send whatever you can do. I can't remember the exact words, to show the world what this is like. To dip the finger in water and give it to me. Go ahead and tell them what this is like, and so that they will not succumb to following the ways of the world and becoming in this ordeal. Now, that could be symbology. We don't know that hell is a place under the earth. We don't know that there's a place of fire. We don't know anything. To me, if there's a grandiose way for our spirits to uniformly connect with all the things in nature that God has made, and we find some way to not let that happen, just the lack and the death and the finality of death is a horrible thing that people could use terminology of hell with, because you didn't go on when you could have. Even that would be bad enough as hell. But, you know, some people want hell to be a societal control thing, and they want to interpret it as, this is what will happen to you if you do not do what society says. We've set up our thing according to God's will and the Ten Commandments, and you're going to follow these things. If you don't, well, then good riddance to you. We'll put you in our prisons. We're not going to rehabilitate you. But if you see it on your own, somehow you'll come out and you're a better person. That's the way society works. It's a sad, sad state of affairs. It's evil. But why am I saying all this? I'm saying this because we're new and we're talking to each other for the first time. I want to make some connections with you. There's a lot to catch up on when you live a life of thinking about this kind of thing and everything else all the time. There's a lot. My brother accuses me of saying, you think too much, you know, you're too analytical. And I am, and we don't get along very well because whenever I share anything, he thinks, oh, I'm thinking, well, you don't see that. Well, that's not the issue. I would rather say, I'm going to show you whether you see it or not because I don't want to take a chance whether you see it. But I get looked at negatively because I'm just Paul. I'm just the brother. And I get looked at as if I'm, what was the word he used? Condescending. I'm not condescending. You might know a lot of the things I talk about here, but I'm going to talk about them anyway because in conversation with two people, you touch on all things, you know? If you know, it's like a gun. You're going into a Lonesome Dove. He throws the little kid a gun and says, look, if you come riding along with us, it's better to have that and not need it than to need it and to not have it. Tommy Lee Jones, as Woodrow F. Call said to him. Oh, by the way, sometimes you see these things in the background. These are guns for my prop convention going thing that I use when I go dress up as Indiana Jones and the Mummy guy, Rick O'Connell and stuff. They're not real. They're just fake plastic things, just in case you were wondering about that. I have spears and things from Africa. My wife went back over there and things like that to make props. I actually have a prop here. This is from the Mummy. You remember when Rick O'Connell was carving at the roof, you know, and then the thing falls down in front of him, and Jonathan was playing golf. That's what this is. I collect things like that. Anyway, the only reason I'm doing this for you is because you're just there, and we're going to talk. Now let's get into the other thing that I want to talk about. My dream last night. So one of the last things I checked before I went to bed, before I got retired for the evening, was that you said you were going to talk more about your experiences with your grandfather. And I think it was a grandparent. I can relate. I remember when I was standing with my grandmother painting the house, the first house we got, and she had loaned us some money to put a down payment on that because we never would have been able to get it without a down payment. Or we could have got it, but then you got to pay the mortgage insurance, and we just couldn't pay more. So she helped us. So she's there helping us paint. I didn't have kids at the time. She's helping me paint the door frames and things like that. And we're having a nice time talking about, you know, Grandpa and stuff, even though he had died. And I said, Grandma, when you go, when you pass on, I knew you're a Christian woman, and I knew that you believe in God, and I know that even though we disagree on a few things, like you're not supposed to drink wine and stuff like that, and she just was off on that. And at the time, I couldn't talk to her about it very well. I wasn't as in tune as I am now. I said, would you please do whatever you can to send back whatever you can to me? Like Houdini talked about that, and different people. And as I was talking earlier about, send Lazarus to dip his finger, and the response given to that person that was in hell was, they have all these things that they need. All the truth is there for them. Prophets, the word, all this. And they don't see, well, then that's the failure. And you can't do anything about that. But what I can do for you is in the physical world. What I can do for you is in the physical world, there are things we can actually look at. And I like Jesus' teachings for this matter, because he knew that people couldn't see beyond. The over-litigiousness of the society that the Jews had become had forced people to become blinded and not faithful to things that were beyond what they could see. And that lack of faith caused them to become stumbling and falling into a curse where the covenant was void. And Jesus had to come to establish a new covenant with us. Now, how did he do that? He saw that failure of that civilization. And so he took everything that they were failing at, took it away. The law and litigiousness and perfect things that are locked down aren't there any longer. Now everything is free form. And he also said, you're so aware of everything that's happening right here in this world. And that's what caused you to stumble, because you took your eyes off the things of faith that you can't see. So I'm going to use that. If you study Jesus' teachings, most of his teachings, not all, because sometimes he just spoke and things like that, but most of his true set down parables that have lasted through the ages and been transformed here for us to see, were about the kingdom of the earth that all people related to really well, and how that compares to the kingdom of heaven, what can't be seen. So once you've locked down that miniature model of all that, then you can put that housing onto the kingdom of heaven, and you can see that it fits. And by going back and forth, you can draw correlations. That's what Jesus did for us. He knew that because the Jews had failed at keeping the covenant that they were supposed to be honoring, that he saw that weakness in all mankind. And even though he came for the Jews, all other mankind eventually grafted onto that, because what he gave us was so apropos for our trapped nature and not being able to see past our own perspectives in this physical realm. Now, let me just share a dream with you, because back when the Jewish people were living out their life, there were people that could interpret dreams. And I talked in the video the other day how there were soothsayers and witches and things like that, and those things were more real then, because everything was locked down, everything was numbered, everything was perfect, and anything that crossed those lines and borders, at least to the vision of the people, seemed like, whoa, what happened? How did you get there? Well, you weren't held down by it. The person that was following Jesus saying, you're the Son of God, and Jesus said, be quiet, this is not the time. That person would cross those borders. He wasn't one of the ones that was housed. He was one of the ones that had the freedom to see past the rigidity of the litigiousness of what that society had become. And he was able to, out of that freedom that he had, see. Some of the Jews had trouble seeing the Son of God. And Jesus spoke in a way that was not straightforward to them. Even the ones that were next to him didn't see till the end. And this caused him to be able to live a little longer so he could do something. Let me get to my dream. The dream is one of the things that wasn't affected by the changeover from one covenant to the next in the free form versus the litigious law exactly the way it needs to be. The dream is something that still exists for us. It's the unconscious mind and the ability to express what it fears or is concerned about or is hopeful for or is trying to work out. Or the mind and the dreams are still there. I can't find a working soothsayer or witch or fortune teller anymore. But I can find the mind's powers. And in the dream I had last night, my grandfather has been dead for probably about 45 years, okay? And I dreamed last night I was in a large gathering place with almost all the people in my family and relatives and extended friends and things like that. And my uncle came forth. I don't know where my dad was, but he said my grandfather had been alive all this time, and he had been in a tucked away hospital room, and we were too delicate to go visit him because had deteriorated tremendously. He wouldn't remember us. His body was in a form that was like not recognizable, and it'd be horrifying for a child and things like this. And I couldn't go there, but he was alive. And I was so angry. I said, well, why did you let me go through my entire life of 45 years believing he wasn't alive? I was so sad. And I never really got the answer for that. And I was so saddened because I said, take me to him. Let me see him anyway. I don't care if he doesn't remember me. I had this long enduring love for him. I want to see him anyway. He says, well, don't come near and touch me and hug me. I said, I'm sorry you had to endure this and holding this back. As I gave my uncle a hug, I said, don't touch me. I've been close to him, and you can't touch me because I've been close to him, and something will rub off. And I said, I don't care. I don't care if I die or what happens to me. I'm going to hug you anyway and let that touch me. I don't mind. So my conviction to be finding a way to my grandfather somehow was so strong. I'm sharing this with you because I had this dream just last night. Then I woke up. You know how you wake up and you have a sense of relief? Well, I wasn't relieved. I've had dreams many times that my friend that was killed in college in a car accident was alive. And I'm not relieved when I wake up. I go, oh, shoot, he's not alive. But this one I was relieved. I said to myself, oh, he was alive, but I couldn't reach him. They wouldn't take me to him. What good was that? Then I realized when I woke, no, he has died. I was there by my grandmother's side as he laid in a coffin, and I looked up and I saw my grandmother say, he's so cold and lifeless. And she had the bravery to touch his hand, not me. But I watched all that, and I realized, oh no, that was real. But in my mind I thought, no, that didn't happen. So I blocked that out just long enough for the length of the dream. But I realized, oh no, that was there. And I asked her to be taken away and go spend some time with my great-grandmother that morning because I couldn't take the sadness and bear that anymore. And later when she died, I went to her funeral. I cried profusely, and I realized so many good things about her that I hadn't even realized. See, my grandmother and my grandfather were together, and my grandfather came from Alabama, and some of his roots were some of those roots now that we know of, possible racial things and stuff like that. And I say, if my grandfather had been alive, I would have talked to him. When I came into consciousness, I would have helped him. They overcame smoking because they went to their church and they didn't agree with that. They don't drink. I said, that's wonderful, that's wonderful. But where did you leave your ties to the racial things? I never knew. I never saw any indication. The church we went to didn't have any blacks. But when I left to go to Florida and I kept to visit my grandmother, she would take me to the church still, even though he wasn't there. And we'd go and visit and see all the other people, and it made a connection for me. I remember we still sit in the same spot where my grandfather sat and all those things. And she was on the way one time. She picked up a little African-American boy and took him to church. And I was so glad to see that, because in front of Jesus, in front of God, we're not different. But a lot of times I think of the racial divide in the Deep South where my grandfather came from, thought that. And I think I could have helped him, but no, maybe not. I don't know. But I guess my sense of, what if he was? What if he hadn't gone where he needed to go? That's what the dream meant. Could I get to him? I don't care what happens to me. I want to reach to him like the lamb in the pit in the Good Shepherd parable. I was relieved when I came back to awake consciousness that he was dead. It was the opposite of every time I dream about somebody I want to have with me again. It was the opposite. And I felt confident that because of the way he lived his life and the way my grandmother had lived her life, and even though they didn't send anything back to me, that I could say, oh yes, I know that you're there. Because my grandmother thought that it wasn't that way, and that Bible verse I gave you about it's not that way. There's a great void placed between us, according to that verse, and no one can cross it between hell and beyond. And no one can cross it. The idea is, don't live your life in such a way that you would end up there without consciousness. Societal controls try to make it about do what you've got to do because we say so, because we're higher than you, and so therefore we must know. Well, Jesus warned about that. He said, don't put your faith in man. But that's the way society's structured. I resist that. And in consciousness, I try to show other people, not just to say, no, I resist it because of that, but to resist it because of the right reasons to resist it. So now we get to the point of why you smell things and hear things and feel things while you're painting, okay? The brain, I'm just going to talk about the physical realm things. It's possible that the lingering remnants of the old world still are here. I haven't really personally witnessed them, and I don't think they're true. I think witches and things like this, they just have these grandiose illusions of grandeur, and nobody can prove anything. UFOs, witches, whatever, nothing. There's nothing, not even Bigfoot. And a lot of it's a problem with mankind and their need to be validated, need to be believed by others, a way to be drawn in, a lot of this. But it's also a lot coming from our own longing. So a lot of it feels to us like, this is pure, this is innocent, this is natural. I'm not like that, but then I share it and no one else does. Well, here's the thing. Because all those others that had already tried to do that had already been dismissed, you're also going to be dismissed. The truth is, people don't want to find a way to be consciously aware enough to welcome you. I have, and I can. I can say, yes, it can exist. Yes, you could be genuine. But I can also say, but there's also reason and meaning. Just like I brought up flatliners. Your brain makes neural connections, electrical, charge, light. If you look into quantum physics and you look at things are composed of energy and light. There's no solid matter. You're painting a painting. You're thinking hard. But as you paint, I always listen to talk shows and stuff like that. When I was an illustrator, I used to listen to talk shows. Because a lot of things you're doing, creativity flows. It's not mundane, but it's mundane enough that your subconscious brain can listen to other things. I listen to positive talk shows that I could gain something out of. When you're painting and you're thinking, especially about the subject matter that you're thinking about, what's happening is the unconscious mind that lifts away from your mind and you focus on what you're doing, it becomes increasingly tied to what it is that you're thinking about. And you have to realistically realize that your subconscious mind could be firing off neurotransmitters and electrical charges in that ocean of light inside you that's as large as the universe. Some people might say there's infinite small and infinite large. And if it fires off those transmitters and certain things give you a feeling of that person nearby, or a person's smell, or whatever. My wife has said she smelled her grandmother's perfume at certain times. I personally remember Alabama, going down to visit my relatives there, and when I smell mothballs and a certain type of sense, you think, well, that was there. I didn't know it at the time. I smell it now. I go, oh, that's that. So when you're going through an environment, you actually smell a certain smell. It can bring you right to that if you're not painting and you're not thinking about it intensely. It can bring you right to that if you smell the smell, like I do with mothballs going back to Alabama. But if you're intensely painting, you don't need that sensory to really be there. You can fire off those neurons inside of you and your brain thinks it's there. There are all kinds of scientific studies about, you can tell someone something's hot water, it feels like cold, different things like this. And you test, and by the power of suggestion and the power of certain sensibilities being blindfolded or different things like this, you can get somebody to think something that's not actually happening. These things are real world things. I would like to suggest to you that it is possible, and I believe you, that God could make this happen. It could be real. But I want you to be more confident of what we know, that the mind is so powerful that it's capable of doing that as well. This will bring you comfort and peace. You have a great connection to have that number 316 tattooed on your chest. You have a great connection of love. You have a great connection as an artist reaching out. I'm an artist. I paint, but I paint with ideas now. I've gone down this long road less traveled to heightened consciousness, and I've used my artistic analytic abilities to get there. But I want you to know I understand that it's possible. And I used to talk to people about ghosts and stuff like that, and I used to say, yeah, that's possible. But it also could be the way you're perceiving something, and because you're being held back and you're regressing into yourself, when you see something that you need to see, or feel something that you need to see, or see something over your shoulder or a reflection in a mirror really quickly, it becomes so real to you because you need it to. The mind did that the same way I did in my dream the other night. I needed my grandfather to be there so I could reach out and touch him. But then when I came back to reality, I said, no, In faith, I realized he was on the path he needed to be. I didn't need to help him. I didn't need to reach out and lift him up. He was already there. We all have errors and mistakes. He was already there. But out of my sense of need, it made me dream about that. And your suggestion made me think about that more than I normally would. And so therefore I dreamed about it, because that was what you were in a quandary on. And I could say that, even then, I could say, God did this. He let me have this happen to me so that I could talk to you today. And that's fine. It could work that way. But an insistence that it has to becomes the problem of mankind. They eventually go into different religions and eventually come into different beliefs, push down everybody else, and have war about it. That's not what Jesus came for. That's not what God wanted about mankind. Even though he gave the power to the Jews to win wars, if they would follow him, that's not the God that we're serving now according to the covenant that Jesus puts in front of us. And the last thing I'd like to leave you with, and I forgot it, and I hope it comes to me here for a second. What is it? Oh, yeah. Okay, I got it. Okay. So I always say to my brother, I always say, not my brother. Well, I have said to my brother, I've said it to many, because I'm the one lone person in my family that's this way. Everybody else is not. And I'm more liberal bent, and they're not. I say one of the problems with mankind is that a person, whether it be a president, a televangelist, a scientist, an atheist, a zealot, a regular person, whatever, a poet, an artist, they compose, like, say, Genesis, for instance, or scientific quantum physics, or evolution, or whatever. They compose various ways that they make everything. They do extensive research and theories, or they do great poetic, you could call Genesis symbolism. Maybe there was no apple. Maybe apple was sex. Maybe apple was a confrontation that they had to get past and they failed at it. Maybe there was no tree. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the Garden of Eden was symbolic for the way the world was. Maybe there was no, boom, there's creation of man, and there he is. Maybe man evolved, and at some point the hammer came down and said, right at this point it was something else. Right at this, we're calling him Adam, and he's man. Be willing to be flexible. Be willing to see that the power of God that we can't even comprehend enough to even see where he is, because we keep looking, where is he, is so large that we can't see it. We step into a realm of faith there. But in this realm that we're in right now, in order to not have brother against brother and other man against man, that Jesus said he didn't come for peace, we must be aware that any way that God shapes it could have been the way. And if it isn't the way we see it, it still could be the way. But when you say, and you see people butting heads like, it's the infallible word of God, no, this is science, and it's got to be this way, that's the same thing as two different cultures fighting. That leads to bloodshed, and it must be this way or the other. In our following of Jesus, we must never be that way. We must see what he's saying to show us that we're not that way. If we leave brother in peace. If they fall, we'll always reach if they'll ask. But we won't reach if they won't ask. Because we're not to throw our pearls before swine. We'll go an extra mile. We'll go extra length. We'll give our cloak and our overcoat too if we're asked. We'll give more if we're sued. We'll turn the other cheek if we're slapped. We'll do whatever we need to do to be there for that person and go further than they request us to. But once we've done that, if that person will push you down and not have anything to do with it, then, just like he gave the assignment at the time for the disciples to go into the different areas and tell people the good news, then at that point, at some point, you have to dust the dust off your feet and walk on, because there are others that would receive. And so what I do with conscious counseling is, I am there for anyone in the world that needs a friend or someone to talk to, or heightened conscious advice. But are they breaking down the doors? Am I going out and advertising? Am I going out making money? No. This is real and genuine and true. And anybody that comes here can gain that. But only if they find me through a way that God delivers them. As I go through life and I put enough topics up, eventually someone's going to search for a topic and they're going to see a value in what I'm saying, and they'll come. Or as I go through life, and I have now for many years, making costume pieces and things like that. Eventually, some people will come, and I'll help them. They may stay, they may not, like you. You found me. I'm a person that's rare in this world. I will be there for you as long as you'd like me to be. How many people can you find that say that? The purpose and life purpose that I have just happens to be this. Everything else you've known me for is just the way that I conduct myself in the world. I don't serve money. I work so that I can have money and means to survive. The Son of Man had no place to lay his head, but they did have a money purse they carried around. But they would walk by the fields, and they would let grains of wheat come off in their hands and eat them, even on the Sabbath. And they said, "What are you doing? You're harvesting." Jesus used that as an example to say, no, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. You have made the rules of this world so litigious that even you couldn't abide by them. I was at the post office. I'll end with this. I was at the post office the other day checking out for you how to get your thing. And I had a lot of time to stand there because they couldn't cash the thing. I went around and looked at all the things on the wall, and one of the things was the rules. And, you know, Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And he used that in the context of understanding that we shouldn't be swearing because anything else that comes out of our mouth isn't necessary, but it's actually coming from evil. Because a firm belief and stance on what we believe in, that God's put in our heart, is all that's necessary. So when I click on accept to a contract, because of the loosing and binding that was given to us at the cross, I know that I'm covered because my mentality's higher than what's being asked of me. But there are also contracts that we're held accountable for that were in place before we were even born and we didn't know. And I was standing at that post office and I go, oh my gosh, I've been using the post office doing this sending out costuming stuff for like 25 years. And I just found out that according to the contract of the law, when you're walking, from your car or whatever, how can I know whether I've ever spit on the sidewalk? How can I know whether a fly ever went in my mouth and I don't know. Apparently, I broke the law if I ever spit on the post office property. I like to say, I speed every day. Everybody does. It's safer to go at the speed of the traffic than to go at the speed. We're living in a world where we can't possibly live up to what's being asked of us. If you read all the licenses and contracts, and I have videos on this too. I don't want to go into too much on it. But I just can't. I thought it was funny to share with you because I went to the post office and I saw that was an illegal spit. How could I be accountable for that? This is the nature of man. It's flawed and it's narrow. If you watch The Matrix, Morpheus said, one of the great advantages you have is you're not set on a certain set of rules, like numbers, right? Like the computers are, ones and zeros. You're freeform. And because you're freeform, you can do things they can't, and that's how you will win. That's what Morpheus said, and it's so true. That's why that movie is so powerful, and that's why you can win. Don't be bound by thinking you must see it the way that it is, because if you share it with others that way, and they don't, you'll have lost them. I'm not saying it's not that way, but you'll have lost them. What gain will be made? I know you want it to be real, and it may be real, but it won't be more real than it is, and it won't be more real than your mind makes it, and it won't be more real than God allows for it, and it won't be so real you'll ever just share it with anybody else, because if you did, then it would be ironclad, just like he was asking in hell to have Lazarus dip his finger and not have that great precipice there. We that find the road that few will find and travel on that road that is straight and narrow need to be thankful every day that we're not on the broad road that's paved for destruction. That's one of the greatest things our life purpose should encompass. And if we can't have what we want, we can have what we need. And I like to share that thought with you today as you go through. Be flexible. Be like the nature of water, as Bruce Lee says. Be flexible enough to see that God is flexible, and that anything less that we try to box in is nothing more than our limited mind trying to box God in, and that borders on humanism. That doesn't serve us. That dims our consciousness and makes us live in darkness. And when we do that, we've done a disservice for ourselves, and we've done a disservice to God, because God gave us these minds that are more powerful than we even understand fully. If we don't give them some credit and don't follow Jesus' teachings to stay on that straight, narrow road, we're failing ourselves and others, all others that would be touched by our lives. That's why I speak freely, and that's why I do this. And if you'd like to do it, or even be friends with someone that does do it, here I am. Nice to meet you. Long video for you, but hey, if we were at a coffee shop, would have taken at least that long. Probably be sitting there longer. We'll probably be enjoying it. Such is the nature of mankind and the things worthy of talking about. I have a very little tolerance for trivial things, and I can forget things quickly. Why? Because there is no meaning. This is Paul Roberts, Conscious Counseling 101. I hope this spoke to you and others, and I hope that you'll speak to me then in return to strengthen what I'm trying to do, because I'm not going to strengthen this in the way that corrupts it. And so I'm going to work within this small world. As big as it becomes is fine, but I'm not going to make it happen, because if I make it happen with artificial means, I've failed it. There's some kind of human agenda or some other issue in there, and it becomes corrupt. And if the salt of the earth loses its saltiness, then how does it become salty again? I have to stay honorable and true to those things. Okay, that's what I have to share with you today. Paul Roberts, Conscious Counseling 101. Hope to talk to you soon.